Welcome to Close of Business. I'm Alicia Barry. It was the 2019 election that saw Bill Shorten trounced at the ballot box as voters rejected Labor's plans to curb negative gearing and capital gains tax breaks. Since then, the affordability crisis has continued to deepen, with property prices hitting a new record last month. As Nassim Kadem reports, even some investors say generous tax breaks should be rolled back.
Jason Cox has become skilled at fixing up and selling properties for a profit.
Our method is to have around about 5 properties and flip one out every year, and that way you've got that cyclical 5-year turnaround in the properties. And so we bought properties, Port Douglas, all over the place.
Jason wants to continue claiming tax breaks for his existing properties, but accepts changes should apply to future investments.
I'm fine with that because I've got a daughter and I am concerned about rising house prices. So we need to do something.
Prices rose for a third straight month in April to a new record high, up 0.3% for the month and 3.2% for the year. More than $2,700 was added to the median home value. Darwin led the monthly gains, followed by Hobart, the regions, Perth, Brisbane, Canberra, Adelaide, Sydney and Melbourne.
I think we're still looking at price rises over the course of the year, with lower interest rates being the main tailwind.
The Grattan Institute wants to see negative gearing wound back and the capital gains discount reduced to 25%. Under that policy, it estimates prices would fall by about 1%, but it says $11 billion would be added to the budget bottom line, which could be used to build new homes.
We need to reform planning restrictions. We need to allow more building. I don't think property taxes are very important for the housing affordability crisis. The estimates of the changes will change house prices by 1%, 2%, 4%. It's a non-issue in terms of the big crisis we're facing. To address that, we need to boost supply.
Downward pressure on prices would boost affordability.
If house prices were to fall by, say, 5 to 10% over a 3-year period, that would do more to improve the chances of younger people becoming homeowners than anything that any government has done in the last 60 years.
Australia could withstand at least modest price falls in housing values. For example, we looked at resales data in the December quarter of last year and found that if we reduced across the board sales prices by 10%, you'd still have almost 90% of Australian home sellers making a gross profit.
Laurent Heyman has paid off the family home and is looking to invest in a rental property. Despite standing to gain from generous housing tax breaks, he thinks they should be wound back.
I feel that the Australian public and the housing market would be much better served if the money that was used towards negative gearing would instead be used to build new homes.
A policy few politicians are willing to play.
The inflation genie is officially back in the bottle. The Reserve Bank's preferred measure has fallen within the target band for the first time in more than 3 years. Economists say that more or less guarantees rate relief for consumers, tipping a 1/4 percentage point cut from the RBA at its next meeting in May. Emily Stewart reports.
Disability support pensioner Gail Dean has been priced out of many necessities.
If I do buy an apple, I'll cut it in half and have half today, half tomorrow. Things like meat, forget it.
She'd like more help with the cost of living.
When you hear politicians constantly saying, we understand people are doing it tough, well, do they really? I dare one of them to live my life for a week with a disability and try and live off what I'm living off.
Consumer prices rose 0.9% in the March quarter and 2.4% for the year. The RBA's preferred measure of underlying inflation is now within its target band. Over the 12 months, food prices did accelerate by 3.2%, driven by fruit, veg, meat and seafood. Rent hikes and insurance premium increases both eased but remain elevated, while building cost increases were restrained at 1.4%. And even though some state energy rebates are rolling off, electricity prices are still 11% lower than a year ago.
Inflation has slowed. It doesn't mean that prices are actually falling.
But there could soon be some relief for households and businesses.
Underlying inflation is at its lowest level in more than 3 years. So financial markets and economists are forecasting a 0.25 percentage point cut to the official cash rate in May, with more to come.
We see the cash rate ending at about 3.35%, so really only a 1% cut from peak to trough.
Like many Australians, Gail Dean will be keenly watching what the Reserve Bank decides when it next meets in May.
The Australian share market closed at a 2-month high this week, helped by hopes China will come to the party on US trade talks and US tech earnings. The ASX 200 gained 2.2% and the All Ords added 2.3% by Friday. Clive Maguchu is a senior strategist at State Street. He joined me to wrap up the week. Clive, the Australian share market has extended a 6-day rally on Friday, and that was after China said it might come to the party on US trade talks. How optimistic do you think investors should be about gains on the market? Can they continue?
Well, it's been a good week. As you say, the Aussie market's up almost 3% for the week. So, yes, and that's investors being more optimistic given the 90-day pause we've seen on those universal tariffs. And it's given the Trump administration some time to really make progress on some of these trade negotiations, particularly with some of the friendlier trading partners such as Mexico, Canada, and Japan. However, we think that trade negotiations with China and with the EU are probably going to be more difficult, and these trade tensions will likely last a little bit longer than investors are currently pricing in.
So is there a risk then that the selling could restart?
Yes, for sure. As we say, like once those trade negotiations with China and the difficulty of those things become a reality for investors, I think we will start to see a little bit more caution exercised by investors.
Well, since the trade chaos caused by the tariff announcements occurred, company downgrades are starting to be released. Even here in Australia, we've heard from corporate travel management and Flight Centre this week. Do you think there'll be more to come?
Well, it's a very uncertain environment that we face. And yes, we have seen a number of companies already pull back on providing guidance. So not just providing downgrades, but also just pulling back on providing any guidance and all, given how uncertain the outlook is. And we do anticipate that there'll be a lot more companies coming out with downgrades and removing guidance from the market.
In the US, under Trump, stocks have had their worst start to a presidential term since 1974, but you wouldn't know it from the bounce that we've seen this week.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a pretty interesting April, obviously starting off with that huge sell-off at the start of the month, and then towards the back half of April, we had that rebound once the 90-day pause has been announced. I think over the last week or so, the narrative has changed a little bit. We've seen an improvement in global risk sentiment, and that's really been driven by the earnings season, particularly in the US, where we've seen some of those large US tech firms really lead the way and continue to show that they're still resilient in this environment and providing strong profitability.
What do you make of valuations on the US market? Are they still pretty stretched?
Yeah, I mean, we did that round trip through April, as I said, so we're basically back where we were at the end of March. So, yes, when you look at valuations over the last 2 years, they look pretty stretched, and even more so when you look at a longer time frame, say 20 years or so.
In the US on Friday, we saw US rate expectations fall back. What's going on here? Because there are worries about inflation and growth in the US.
Yes, I think the market kind of got ahead of itself with anticipating that the Fed would step in and cut rates preemptively. But the Fed has been pretty consistent in terms of saying that they're on a wait and see approach to see how these tariffs flow through to the real economy. And so far we haven't seen a lot of clarity on either growth or inflation impacts of these tariffs. And I think it's reasonable for markets to pull back those expectations. And our view has been for a while now that the Fed will cut, We think they'll cut about 3 times this year, but we don't anticipate it'll be any time in the near future.
Clive Maguchu, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's been marked by chaos, market plunges and diplomatic crises, but Donald Trump has hailed his first 100 days as the most successful in presidential history, lauding his tariff policies as well as taking a swipe at Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Before dancing to a crowd of supporters in Michigan, the US president said Mr. Powell isn't really doing a good job. He also dismissed polls suggesting his own popularity is falling and claimed China wants to make a deal to end the trade war. Before the event, Mr. Trump called the Amazon boss Jeff Bezos to pressure the billionaire over a plan to display the cost of US tariffs on Amazon products.
Jeff Bezos was very nice. He was terrific. He solved the problem very quickly, and he did the right thing, and he's a good guy.
In that 100 days, Donald Trump's not only upended the global trading system, but also climate policy. President Trump has ordered the removal of the US from the Paris Agreement, fired thousands of federal workers from climate agencies, dismantled programs, and scrubbed references to climate change from federal websites. I spoke with Tim Buckley, the Director of Climate Energy Finance, on the global implications of the US walking away from climate action. Tim Buckley, after seeing the Trump administration campaigning on drill, baby, drill, it's no surprise that climate isn't the focus of this administration. But what do you make of the dismantling of climate policy infrastructure?
The American administration has created absolute carnage. I think everyone had hoped there would be a level of measurement and order in it, but I think Trump has absolutely astonished everyone at the amount of damage and carnage he's willing to create to effectively pay back his funders and his supporters and undermine the climate science. It's been atrocious to watch.
Do you think that Trump's moves in this space will have a lasting impact on the ability of the US to tackle climate change?
I think it will. Clearly, we are seeing the dismantling of all sorts of key institutions across America, and equally important, investor confidence has been smashed. So when you're investing, you invest for 25, 30 years when you're talking energy infrastructure, but the amount of carnage created in just 100 days means investors are going to be very, very wary of supporting American investment, and they'll reduce capacity, which will be really hard to rebuild. So I do think this is going to do permanent, lasting damage to America, particularly as it is a global technology race, and America was already well behind China.
Yeah, well, can you tell us about China versus the US in this space? Obviously leaves quite a bit of room to China to take the lead.
Yeah, China has absolutely astounded all watchers who are actually looking at what China's actually doing rather than what is talked about outside of China. And you've really got to go to China and see firsthand the astounding scale and speed of operations. And when I talk about China's world leadership in clean tech, we're talking about in nuclear, in hydro, in grid, in wind, in solar, in batteries, in electric vehicles, in absolutely all aspects of the clean energy transformation. China leads the world in terms of the technology, in terms of the manufacturing, in terms of the domestic deployment of those technologies and the export of those technologies. So America walking off the playing field means it leaves China to win the race.
You talked about investor confidence in the US. You follow where the money's going in the energy transition. What do you think Trump's policy has done to the flow of funds into clean energy projects globally?
It has stalled the flow of capital into America, although to some degree we've heard a lot about the collapse of the offshore wind industry in America. But remember, there is bipartisan support, at least for now, for onshore wind and solar in America. And so more than 95% of new capacity adds, net new capacity adds in America in 2025 will be renewable energy and battery energy storage systems. So there is still capital being deployed. we need to see the full outcome, because at the end of the day, those investors are looking beyond Trump and saying, look, at the end of the day, the economics totally support battery firmed renewable energy capacity. But to your question, the global response is going to be very, very interesting. China's response so far has been to double down and go even faster. But I was looking at Pakistan and South Africa this week, and Pakistan deployed an absolutely staggering 15 gigawatts of solar energy just in the last 12 months. We talk about Australia leading the world in renewable energy capacity installs, particularly rooftop solar. South Africa deployed twice as much rooftop solar in 2024 as Australia did. It was a staggering 6.2 gigawatts of rooftop solar in South Africa. Why? It's all about the economics, it's all about energy security, it's all about building energy resilience. And it's staggering that when solar module prices have halved, when battery prices have halved in the last 2 years, thanks to China, other nations are taking advantage of that and building energy independence and energy security.
So, Tim, what does the US move back toward fossil fuel mean for the world's march to net zero by 2050?
The American return to fossil fuel priority does create alarm bells when it comes to the urgency of dealing with the climate crisis. America is the largest producer of fossil fuels in the world, and this, in the short to medium term, is going to reinvigorate the fossil fuel industry, at least in America. But taking a broader view, I'm actually more optimistic. I think this actually creates a very different global geopolitical landscape where we could easily see an alliance of key global nations in a race to the top collectively. We could see increased global collaboration and cooperation. Think Europe working with China and, in fact, then galvanising other nations, Canada, India, Japan, Korea, and hopefully Australia, in a global race to the top. The technology and the economics at the end of the day have changed profoundly. It is the least cost economic solution to deploy renewables, and renewables increase domestic energy security. And so in a world where global trade is being undermined, energy security becomes paramount.
Tim Buckley, thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Alicia.
The race to uncover critical minerals outside of China is intensifying. That's opened up a new frontier for exploration, the seabed. Donald Trump's administration has just signed an executive order to open both US and international waters to deep sea mining, ignoring a global treaty that controls the high seas. Our reporter Adelaide Miller has been investigating. Adelaide, what's the Trump administration trying to do here?
So basically, the US government is trying to speed up the process to begin commercial deep sea mining as soon as possible. And what that means is it's going to position them as a global leader in this critical minerals arena alongside China. But by doing this, they are stepping outside a UN treaty which basically governs the international waters. So that's the International Seabed Authority. They are creating a regulation around commercial deep sea mining, but it's still many years away. And so by the Trump administration announcing that they're going to sign this executive order, they have signed this executive order, they are breaking international law.
And I understand there's one metals company vying for access.
So there is a Canadian mining company known as the Metals Company. They have been doing a lot of exploration work over the years. So they've been exploring what's called the Clarion-Clipperton Zone between the US and Hawaii. And what they have done just this week is they've put in an application to the US government for a commercial permit to basically start mining as soon as possible.
What do environmentalists and scientists have to say about the idea of deep sea mining?
There is a lot of concern among scientists. Some are saying that we know more about space than we do about the deep sea, and that is because it is such a hard area to access. Some of these critical minerals are 4 kilometres below sea level, so it's only recently that we've got the technology to actually start exploring down there. And scientists are saying we're nowhere near close to being able to start commercially mining, and if we do, the destruction to biodiversity could be irreversible.
What's Australia's position on this? Because, of course, this area that you're talking about is between Australia and the US.
So Australia hasn't really said anything, and it's interesting because if commercial mining does go ahead, the Pacific Island nations are going to be some of the first to be affected. Many Pacific Island nations and other countries, 32 actually, have called for a moratorium, but Australia hasn't called for a moratorium. They basically said we don't condone deep sea mining outside of the UN framework, but what is happening between the US and the metals company is a matter for them.
And Adelaide, briefly, is there any consequence that the Trump administration could face for trying to flout this international convention?
Because it is so recent, it's probably too early to say. I mean, the International Seabed Authority have come out and condemned the United States and also the metals company for trying to sort of skirt around this UN treaty. A lot of environmentalists and scientists have also condemned this approach, but it's too early to tell what's going to happen.
Adelaide Miller, thank you so much.
Thank you.
When builders go bust, their clients are covered by compulsory insurance for incomplete or defective work. Yet some are still waiting for payouts years later. One Perth man who spoke to the business says a battle with his insurer has compromised his health and his retirement. Here's Nassim Kadem again.
One of the issues is with the plumbing.
When Amarjit Singh Pabla's builder went bust, his world unravelled. The 73-year-old used some of his superannuation and took on huge debts to build 8 apartments in Western Australia.
Everything from the toilet and the bathroom was coming here. And the basic idea was to make sure that in my retirement, I have a happy retirement. But the way it happened, it's not very happy at the moment. I'm very close to bankruptcy.
Mr. Pabla can't sell the properties until the defects are fixed.
This building is basically encroaching on all the sides, and to rectify that is not going to be an easy task.
An insurance policy came with the building contract, but that came with limits on how much the insurance company would pay out.
I'm suffering. In fact, I ended up having a heart attack a few years ago while I was going through this process.
He says his insurer, QBE, has appointed lawyers to deal with his claim and tried to get him to settle on a lower payment amount, which he rejected. 3 years on, he's still waiting for the insurer to take care of repairs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
They also know it very well that financially we don't have money, we will never take them to court.
When a consumer enters a building contract, the builder must take out what's known as home warranty insurance on their behalf. It's just one of various names the product goes by in different states and territories across Australia. But lawyers and consumer advocates say such policies don't offer adequate protection.
What we need here is a national approach and standard terms and conditions so that people can have peace of mind that when they think they're going to have an event that they're going to need to claim on, that they're not going to be out of pocket hundreds of thousands of dollars.
A spokeswoman for QBE told ABC News the company remains committed to reaching a resolution, and it was common for payouts of settlements to be made in stages. She also said it's standard practice for QBE to engage third-party legal representatives in claims of this nature.
Okay, and what's the address?
Lawyers say consumers should have an independent body they can turn to during disputes.
You're dealing with people who are vulnerable, they're out of their home, for example, they're in debt hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're in no position to take their case to court, or if they are, then they're running a big risk.
Mr. Pabla says QBE's liability is capped at $100,000 per unit. So, as his claim drags out and repair costs rise, the amount the insurer pays out won't go up.
All I wanted is that all the faults within this building are rectified. And once they are rectified, then I'm able to sell and move on.
A costly situation that many other consumers could face as more builders go under.
Australia's manufacturing industry was once the lifeblood of the nation. Now businesses say high labour costs and soaring energy bills are killing off local production and alongside it a critical trade. Rihanna Whitson reports.
Workers like this make the moulds, tools and parts needed to keep local manufacturing alive. But there aren't enough of them.
We've had to knock back a lot of orders because we just don't have the staff to fulfil those orders.
Since the death of the Australian car making industry in 2017, the little-known trades of tool making and engineering pattern making have shrunk.
We've got people in their 70s are still working in the industry on a hands-on trade because they love the industry. But we can't depend upon that. We have to have the young people coming through.
The number of people employed in the sector fell 70% between 2006 and 2021. Manufacturing as a share of the economy has fallen from 14.9% in 1990 to 5.9% last year.
Businesses like this are a key part of the Australian manufacturing supply chain. Without them, the only other option is to go offshore, exposing the industry to global instability.
This stops all the splatter from spreading out on the part.
And the potential threat of intellectual property theft.
Every time that you send a drawing out to overseas, every time you send something out to be manufactured overseas, you are opening yourself up to more risk.
Australia is a very good place for getting brain power and getting new concepts and innovations done. But it's a very hard thing to make products.
A warning for the next federal government.
And that's all from Close of Business. I'm Alicia Barry. Thanks for watching.